Welcome to the next installment of Jay's Analysis. Tonight we cover the top 10 lies of the modern world. 10 notorious, vicious, unscrupulous, dangerous lies that most people still believe. I don't know why, but they still do. Let's get into it. Number 10, post-humanism. The idea, and I think this one's going to be jumping up that chart, approaching number one in the next 20 years, I would guess. We'll have to wait and see. But transhumanism is the idea coined by the Huxleys, Julian Huxley, who wrote up the UNESCO plan for the future for cultural hegemony and hominization. The idea that there could be one global culture. Right? This is the game plan of UNESCO. And what Julian came up with was the idea of moving beyond humanity, right, to the post-human world. So I'm going to say post-humanism or transhumanism is the number 10 delusion. And we can see examples of this with people thinking that they're going to be downloaded into a computer. They're going to be downloaded into a laser disc. They're going to be put on to a zip drive, as we heard Gil Bates talking about this last week. Huge lie, total nonsense. In fact, I recommend the paper on Minds, Machines, and Gödel, which I think is still a good argument for why this can never be the case that computers will achieve consciousness, nor that your consciousness can be put into a computer. They're only mimetic type devices. Number 9, I'm going to say that calling a wee-wee other than a wee-wee is one of the biggest mistakes. Wee-wees are wee-wees, and bud are bud me. Yeah, exactly. JJs are JJs, and wee-wees are wee-wees. You can't lop them off. You can lop them off, but they don't become the opposite of themselves because you lop them off or you put a plastic one on. But a lot of people are coming to believe, and really that's not the main problem. The problem here is the idea of everything being a social construct. Ethics, numbers, reality itself. Like there's a divorce between the concept and the external world. And in fact, the external world can't be known in ultimately what's sort of postmodernism, so therefore it can be defined any way we want. And so this is where we get nothing in the conceptual, propositional truth realm matching up with what we're saying about the external world. The two are divorced. They can never the twain shall meet. And so if that's the case, then make it whatever you want, dude. We are all just LARPing in a D&D fantasy world. So I'm going to say that is number 9. Number 8. Some of these are going to be connected, of course, by the way. Number 8, the idea of progress. Everyone seems to have this generic conception that we're progressing, right? Modernity, we've progressed. We're progressing so fast beyond where we were 5, 10 years ago. But in order to know what you're progressing to, it assumes some benchmark, some standard that is telling you where to go, or that this value judgment of saying that it's a better state than before is some objective standard of value judgment. But nobody really seems to know what that is in most people's minds. Right? What are we progressing to? What are we progressing away from? How do we know that it's not digression? Right? How do we know we're not going into devolution as opposed to evolution? So there's nothing inherent about the idea of progress that tells us exactly what it is outside of a worldview as a whole. I mean, what you think is progress is going to be determined by your worldview. Nevertheless, slogans, everybody believes random generic slogans, are very popular. They work beautifully for propaganda. I think Vladimir Lenin was one of the champions of just give the people slogans. It doesn't matter what is behind it. Who cares? They're not going to figure it out. Just give them slogans. You can lead a revolution just by slogans. Number 7, I'm going to say that this one's kind of dropped down. I think it's losing a little bit of its steam. This had a lot of steam for maybe a century and a half, and I think it's kind of coming to an end. It's being replaced by things that are not that great, probably equally as bad or another step in the wrong direction. But I would say atheism and materialism are the number 7 lie of the modern world. And this is connected to the last one, progress, the idea that, well, we progressed past superstition. Now we follow logic and reason. But as we see, eventually it kind of becomes evident that logic and reason also are mythologies. And this is precisely the argument that postmodernism makes against progressivism, the older idea of progressivism and atheistic materialism. The more consistent we try to be with that, the more we realize that things like ethics, things like numbers, things like meaning, truthiness itself, doesn't seem to be identical to matter, to things that are always in flux. So are those also just figments? Are they just illusory as well? Are they just as illusory like we saw previously with the idea of everything being a social construct, right? It seems to lead in that direction. Again, I'm not saying these are all false ideas, but they're hugely popular still, right? People still have these completely ludicrous, contradictory notions drilled into their psyche, and they will defend them to the death. Number 7, as I said, atheism, materialism, following upon a lot of revolutions, all the previous revolutions, scientific revolution, Protestant revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution. The revolutionary ethos is what has given rise to this constant sort of churning towards more and more and more revolutionary notions and ideas. And I think the emptiness, the vacuousness of the atheistic materialist perspective is what gave rise to the next lie, which is, I'm going to go ahead and place it above. I'm going to say it's number 6. And that is the New Age consciousness, occult, spiritism idea. And I think this is actually now kind of moving beyond atheism and materialism to be more popular. It's the age of Aquarius, bruh. Right? This is promoted again from the top. It was people at the Esalen Institute, people who were formative in the 60s countercultural revolution, people connected to the CIA, Tim Leary, these kinds of people, who really promoted the idea that somehow, for whatever reason, in the 60s, we were at the apex of a turning point in big yugas, right? In giant chunks of 2000s of year, arbitrary categories that, now that we're at this, turn, because we're going to see the turning of the millennium, right? We're going to see the year 2000. The boomers born in the 60s would see 2000. So they would be this formative generation for bringing in a new aeon, a new age, a new aeon. And many of the esoteric and occult hermetic groups share this same ideology, this idea that we're entering into a new aeon. Whether it's the aeon that hermeticists talk about, the yugas, or the age of Aquarius, this is really in the background of all of the new age spirituality movements. All the psychonauts, right? Lilly, Terence McKenna, people we've covered many, many times here. And this is one of the biggest lies because it promotes just this weird notion that, we don't really want that materialism anymore. Let's move into this vague notion of spirituality. But what is it? It has no content. It's just spirituality. Why should we follow something spiritual? What does that mean? Why is something, quote, spiritual better than something not spiritual? Or higher or better than something physical or material? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't, right? I mean, there's nothing inherently about just saying something spiritual that lets us know that somehow that's better. Maybe there's evil spirits, right? I mean, maybe evil spirits deceive us into thinking that we're being spiritual, right? So there's nothing prima facie on the face of it that tells us that because something is new or that because something is spiritual, that it's therefore good or better. We're just assuming that, just like with progress, right? Progress is part of a whole paradigm that we have in our belief system, our worldview. There's nothing about it that stands out as somehow, oh, we all know what progress is. Really? Do we? And I would say number 5, I'll throw in one they might not expect. I'm going to say diet. More people believe lies about diet than they do perhaps about New Age. And so I would say GMO, health, like the older idea of the food pyramid, that you need this like giant amounts of grains, that should be your primary diet focus, and that you need all of this, like, you know, basically just the normal diet, the normie diet. Total nonsense, total BS. You know, you look into the carnivore diet, you look into keto, this kind of stuff. People, for the most part, don't eat primarily plant-based diets. And yet now this is being pushed everywhere. And somehow somebody has it in their mind that eating a bunch of plants is what, like eating like a rabbit makes you healthy. You're not a rabbit, dude. I mean, maybe if you believe that everything is a social construct, you think you're a rabbit, but you're not a rabbit just because you think you are. But I'm going to say that is number 5. Number 4 is again kind of undergirding the previous ones, and it's one that you would expect me to say, which is dialectics, either ors. Most of us believe in some kind of phony notion of either or dialectics. And now, in a sense, dialectics are a result of the fall. And this is things that are placed or believed to be in tension that actually aren't in tension. So it could be anything like a political party, the liberals, the conservatives, the GOP versus Democrats. Right? That's a very popular, well-known false dialectic that a lot of people refer to. It's a great one. Are you going to buy, Coke or Pepsi? And they're basically owned by the same shareholders. This kind of stuff. False dialectics, false choices, false either-or dichotomies. And they underlie all kinds of things that we see in the world. Like people think that if you say you investigate some event and you come to believe some other narrative, oh, you must be then part of a group of liberals. Oh, in this case, you must be part of that conservative group. As if you can't investigate the topics on their own merits. Like as if that automatically puts you into some arbitrary group, right? It doesn't follow. It doesn't follow from the fact that because you're investigating one side of something or a different narrative of something, that therefore it automatically includes as a kind of guilt by association you with everything else. So that's a big one, right? I mean, we're all kind of, especially in the modern world, we're fooled by this phony football match of, it's like WWF wrestling, right? It's false dialectics. Number 3, I'm going to say number 3 is the idea that, well, we all know that the experts are right. The managerial society, the expert class, the academics, the degrees. Look at all those numbers. Look at all those digits next to the name. Gil Bates, I mean, he worked on computers for so long. He must know everything about medicine too, right? Really? Yeah, no, that doesn't follow, does it, right? Well, there's a guy on a TV in a suit with a tie. He must know how the world really works, right? Right? The newsman. The idea that experts, academics, computer engineers somehow have some higher authority or class by virtue merely of being involved in some academic credentials is ludicrous. I mean, how often have experts been wrong? Now, does that mean that experts are always wrong? No, don't fall into a dialectics, right? Number 4, because I said that we should question or be skeptical of so-called authorities. There are people who are experts, and there's nothing wrong with expert testimony. But a lot of times you'll find in life that experts conflict. What do you do in that case? How do you know which ones to choose? Is it just, oh, well, there's 500 experts over on this side and 333 experts on this. So obviously, it's not obvious. Just because there's a higher number on one side or the other, you could have 1,000 experts on one side and one guy on the other side, and one guy's right? I mean, that's conceivable. So really, it doesn't work that way, right? Truth's not determined by some kind of like democratic percentile of who's got more numbers, right? So I would say that we have to be aware, and this is, as we said, part of that sort of technocratic plan mentioned by Quigley, whole chapter on the coming managerial society where you'll be ruled by managerial experts. Tavistock was part of that too. Number 2, bling bling. Give me them clicks. Give me that e-celeb. I can tell you from the lofty heights of e-celeb fame, now being this highest level of e-celeb, I'm joking, fame and money. I mean, money is essentially a symbol for energy, for human energy, transactions. It in itself really doesn't have any value other than what value is perceived to have. And that's why anything could stand as a symbol of value. Right? Tally sticks, right? In the medieval world, were a form of currency. Shells, right? All kinds of different things have functioned as currencies. And so money really is whatever's perceived to have a kind of value. That's not to say that some things can't have inherent value. Surely they can. But typically when we're speaking of finance, we're speaking of the idea of symbolic forms of exchange. And people think that this, if I get those, the accumulation of ones and zeros on the screen, my bank account, get them Bitcoins or social status, fame, then I will have what I'm seeking. Now, nothing wrong with the acquisition of funds, nothing wrong with having money, but the love of money is what's the root of evil. And this, as Scripture says, it blinds many. Right? They get lost in the pursuit of something that's merely a tool, and they miss the big picture. And the same is true with fame. Fame is fleeting. Money is fleeting. These things go away. We're all going to die. You're not going to be able to take your Bitcoins with you into your virtual download, Bill Gates matrix, where you're making love to dragons all day, right? In your Bill Gates utopia. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. I know you want that so bad, but it's not going to happen, bro. So money and fame, I'm going to say number 2. People still chasing the dream, which is actually a lie. Number 1, and the two are connected here to combine these two. The number 1 lie, evolution and relativism. Evolution gave us the idea, I mean metaphysically speaking here, not the theory, not the notion of adaptation of species. Adaptation is obviously true, but the idea of the transmutation of species that they just kind of morph into all the different forms that we have, and everything came from some primal amoeba or singular thing that's always it's split into 2 different genders magically at one point, and then magically it developed the 2 different organs and so forth. Total nonsense. And one way to philosophically prove this is to point out that its corollary that I'm including in number 1, which is relativism. Relativism is itself a product of this notion of everything being in constant flux and change. If everything is in constant flux and change, then the proposition everything is in constant flux and change also has to be in constant flux and change, and therefore isn't true. I mean, it's that dumb, really. So the idea of something that's observed in the natural world and becoming a grand narrative worldview itself is also absurd. It's the number 1 lie. I mean, most people think that truth, ethics, metaphysics, they're all just purely relative, man. Whatever floats your boat, whatever you think, that's your... we all have a right to our opinions, man. Is that true? Universally, that we all have a right to our opinions? How do you know that? Right? It's a very simple way to show that this is a faulty presupposition. I would say that's my top 10 lies the modern world believes. If you like this video, click below, share, and subscribe to Jay's Analysis, and let me know what you think in the comments below.